Hey everyone, it's Angelwolf here, and I'm here with Benzilla. Oh,
Hey, everyone!
sorry about that. Don't know what happened there. But today we're
It's fine.
watching.
Don't worry about it.
There's not a name in the
Sorry.
world that screams
Today we're watching Flying Scotsman.
the glory days of steam.
More specifically, the full story of Flying Scotsman's USA tour from 1969 to 1973, and shoutouts to the unlucky tug.
Yep, ready?
Anyways, shall we begin?
We shall. And make sure you leave a like and subscribe.
There's
Also,
not
one
a
more thing
name in
before we
the
start.
world that-
Be sure to show some show some support to the unlucky tug. He makes amazing content, and show him some love.
And tell him.
Anyways, let's
we
begin.
sent you there.
There's not a name in the world that screams the glory days of steam so much as Flying Scotsman.
Ooh.
Britain's most
Indeed.
beloved steam engine and the most famous railway engine in the world. Every train
Gee,
fan
I
has a
wonder
book
why.
with Flying Scotsman in it, a model of it in some form, or at the very least opinions on the many events of her lifetime. Nothing brings train fans together more so than this bright green engine.
Oh,
It's hard to
oh,
imagine a
people.
timeline without Flying Scotsman in it. But what if I told you that timeline almost became a reality?
Oh?
I'm going to tell you all in excruciating detail the story of Flying Scotsman's ill-fated tour of the United States and how she almost didn't return home.
USA tour. New York, Anderson and Alabama, Texas, Green Bay, Wisconsin, Montreal, Canada, San Francisco, California. Oh, let's begin with the story.
Yeah.
Flying Scotsman is Britain's most beloved steam engine and the most famous steam engine in the world. Why is this engine so famous, you ask? Well, for several reasons.
Well, can I
First
explain?
of all, she is the only surviving member of Sir Nigel Gresley's incredibly successful game-changing
yes.
A3 class
The great
locomotive.
Sir Nigel
Built as
Gresley.
A1s and converted to
Everyone,
A3s
before
later
your
on,
interviews,
the A1s were the
Flying
first
Scotsman
ever
is a
successful
boy.
British Pacifics and redefined what an express engine looks
There
like
she
for
is.
all people. The
Where
engine
was it
itself
he?
is also famous for it is named
Well,
after the service,
IRL,
the
most
Flying
people refer to
Scotsman,
steam engines
which ran
as
daily from
G.
King's Cross to Edinburgh in Scotland and back. As it was the namesake of the London and North Eastern Railway's most known service, it became the mascot engine for the
You will say
LNER in all
pride
promotional
of the
material,
LNER.
which of course led to what she is
Wow.
most
I
known
got
for.
one of those
In
posters.
1934, she
Hung
was
up
the
on my
first
wall.
steam engine on record to break 100 miles an hour. That's a fact that is still disputed to this day,
Wow.
but regardless,
100 miles
she's
per
famous
hour.
for it.
You think that record would be very
In the
hard to
early
beat?
1960s, British
Yeah.
Railways announced its modernization plan to fully transition rail motive to diesel power. Once diesels and electrics were ready to
dear.
take them over, steam engines were all to be withdrawn from service. And that, for most engines, meant one fate: the cutter's torch. In
AKA
1962,
scrap.
British Railways announced their plans to scrap Flying Scotsman, against much heavy public criticism.
So
One man was
I like
not
that.
going to let that happen.
Yeah.
A
Oh.
man by the name of Alan Pegler.
Alan Pegler.
Pegler was a businessman and worked for British Railways overseeing operations on the eastern region. He had an absolute fascination with Flying Scotsman, an obsession that started when he was just a boy, and he witnessed Flying Scotsman, brand
Really?
spanking new at the time, at the 1924 British Empire
Ooh.
exhibition. He also played a huge role in preserving the Festiniog Railway in Wales in 1951. That's not at all related
I
to
have
this story
never
at all,
heard of that,
but it's
Harry.
worth mentioning as it's
I'm
proof to
assuming
show
it's
just
that
how
a narrow
much this
thing,
man
though.
loved steam engines. When the news of Scotsman's scrapping went public, Pegler stepped in and bought Flying Scotsman outright from British Railways. If it weren't for this man, Flying Scotsman would not still be around today. But ironically, also because of this man, Flying Scotsman may have also been lost forever, only 10 years later. But I'm getting ahead of myself.
Really?
Pegler spent ungodly amounts of money restoring Flying Scotsman to her former glory at Doncaster. British Railways was very adamant about not letting steam run on their main lines at the time. But Pegler managed to persuade them a deal that was mutually beneficial, allowing Scotsman to haul special excursion trains. In the late 60s, Flying Scotsman was the only steam engine allowed on British Railways mainline metals, hauling rail tours. During this time, she was fitted with her rather famous second tender to carry extra water. In a sea of dirty, grimy, dark, smelly, loud, unfriendly, fume-coughing, gross diesels, this bright green steam engine of a happier bygone era was a really appealing sight to people. The rail tours proved to be monumentally successful, and Flying Scotsman continued its status as a common household name.
Wow.
During this time, Pegler got the idea to ride Scotsman's success even further and take her abroad, on a big tour of the United States.
I can't wait to see how this turns out.
As Pegler was not officially licensed as an engine driver, he was not allowed to legally drive Scotsman on the main line in Britain. But overseas, he could. The US was not as strict about that back then. All he had to do was figure out a way of getting her there. Now, Pegler was a very persuasive man, and somehow, in 1969, he managed to gain support from Prime Minister Harold Wilson. Wilson's Labour Party government helped fund the tour, under the request that Pegler use the tour as a means of advertising British companies to North America. The tour was to be a trade show on rails.
Very creative idea, Mr. Pegler.
Signed up, including Lloyd Bank and the Royal Shakespeare Company. The news of England's most cherished steam engine going overseas was met with much criticism. Several opposed the idea and said that if Flying Scotsman is to go to America, she will never return. But Pegler was a dreamer and still moved forward with his plan despite the criticism. To run in America, Flying Scotsman would need some modifications.
Great Alan Pegler.
Railroad regulations in the States were very different from the UK. In the US, steam engines are required to be fitted with a chime steam whistle, a bell, Buckeye couplers, and a cowcatcher. So Scotsman was fitted with all of them. Her second water tender would also prove to be very useful in the long distances
I've got
to
be honest here. Flying Scotsman does look a bit weird with American features on it.
The train consisted of a regular plain
you get what I mean.
1, 3 Thompson brakes and 2 Gresley brakes, 2 named Pullmans, and the very special Devon Bell observation coach at the tail end. The 5 brakes were all refitted into exhibition cars and had their windows covered up. These were not meant to carry passengers. They held the exhibits on Britain's companies that Pegler agreed to promote on this tour. The Mark I carried the crew and ran behind the engine with corridor connections through the tenders to the cab, and the observation coach acted as a lounge and bar. The 2 Pullmans, named Isle of Thanet and Lydia, were not a part of the train for any touring purpose.
Just like a walking,
These coaches had been used extensively during World War II by General Dwight D. Eisenhower. They were to be brought to the National Railroad Museum in Green Bay, Wisconsin, where they would be left to be displayed with the preserved A4 there, named Dwight D. Eisenhower after the former president himself.
I wonder why that train looks familiar too.
All the coaches were repainted into special Pullman liveries to match
a little bit like Mallard.
Everything was set. Alan Pegler was ready to take the Flying Scotsman on her big 2-year-long United States tour, from Boston, Massachusetts to Houston, Texas the first year, and around the West Coast and finishing at Green Bay, Wisconsin the second year. Here is the story of how he did it.
Well, let's see how this turns out for old Scotty.
On September 17th, 1969, British Railways delivered Flying Scotsman to the docks in Liverpool, where the ship, the Saxonia,
Angel, you don't mind me naming out the locations of where Scotsman goes,
3 total ships were arranged to transport the whole consist. The coaches were all loaded first
just
on
in case
the 2
our
other
viewers
ships, while the
don't know
Saxonia
where
was prepped
it
to carry
is
the engine.
in America.
At the crack of dawn the next day, loading of the engine commenced. The tenders were lifted first, and finally, the engine. On the morning of September 18th, Flying Scotsman's wheels left British soil and would not touch it again for another 3.5 years. The trip across the Atlantic took 10 days. On September 28th, the Saxonia reached Boston Harbor. Scotsman was unloaded and touched American soil for the first time.
Wow. Boston, MA.
Not mad. Sorry,
Ah.
everyone.
Don't worry about it.
But we will have to
Just-
through it. I'm
Yeah. So this will be part 1 for this one. So let us know if you want us to do a part 2 of the video.
Yep.
Also, one more thing before we go, Mr. Unlucky Tug, you're watching this. Love your content.
We
Keep
hope
up
you
making them.
making them. Yeah. And everyone, don't forget to subscribe to us and unlock the content.
Well, bye bye everyone.